Hi, this is Cindy Shebley from the Web Seller Circle. This is a presentation about getting the very best, highest quality photos you can for your Amazon listings. Now, as you know, Amazon itself will provide high quality photos for most every listing in the catalog. However, there are occasions that you're going to run across missing images, or you might even be putting a new listing into the Amazon catalog and you'll want to add a photo. And that is what we're going to talk about in this presentation. Let's go ahead and get started. There are a few things that Amazon require, and it's good to know these so you'll stay out of trouble. Amazon, when you're uploading a photo, accepts several different file formats, including TIFF, JPEG, GIF, and PNG format. Unlike in the past, when you had to reduce the image sizes, make them smaller so that the load time was faster on these websites, most all websites now want you to keep those images large. So when you are manipulating the image in your photo editing software, if you are resizing them, make sure that you leave at least 1,000 pixels at the one end. It doesn't matter whether it's the height or the width, but make sure it's a good big photo. Don't reduce it down to a smaller image. Make sure that there are, again, at least 1,000 pixels at the largest end. This is different than most everything you hear about SEO on the internet, where you want to name the file with the item so that you get that little extra SEO bump from the metadata information. Amazon doesn't want you to name the file after the name of the book or whatever it is that you might be uploading. So when you name the image, be sure to use this file format that Amazon wants. They want it to be named either after the ASIN number, the ISBN number, the EAN number, or the UPC number. And that is the number under the barcode that's provided on each item. So if you have more than one photo of the item, let's say use the UPC code, you would then use that whole number for each one of them, and then you would use an optional variant code. So maybe the first one would be no number after, but the second picture would have a 2 after it, and the third picture would have a 3 after it, and the fourth one could have a 4 after it. But keep it as simple as possible for your own sanity. Don't put any dashes or underscores or spaces into the number system when you are naming that file format. So again, here are the samples that they want you to use. Again, the ASINs, that's the Amazon identification number, your ISBN number, and they want that larger new ISBN number, the ISBN 13 number. If you've got an EAN number, they'll accept that, or a JAN, J-A-N number, or the UPC code. So they want you to use one of these product identifiers instead of just naming the file. Here's an example of what they consider a good file format. They are using the bottom numbers under a UPC symbol. Now here are some samples of things they don't want. They don't want the dashes or the underscores, and they don't want you to put in anything like the cover name and then the ISBN number afterwards. They want the number or the product identifier only. When you are creating that image, you do need an all-white background so it's uniform and it matches the rest of the Amazon catalog look. And if you have a manufacturer who is providing you with pictures, some of the manufacturers will give you line drawings instead of actual photos. These aren't acceptable to Amazon. So if you are provided with line drawings, it's up to you to either take a picture of the actual item or have your manufacturer, whoever is supplying you with the pictures, take pictures of that actual item. Again, no line drawings. The picture must be a high quality picture. So no pixelated image. We get back to that having as large an image as possible. If you have not enough pixels, you have a smaller image. When somebody enlarges it, what happens is those small squares or those small pixels become enlarged and pixelated. And down here in this slide, you'll notice my example where I've enlarged this teapot lid, and it's just not big enough. It's becoming out of focus. So make sure that your pictures are as sharp as possible and that you do have a large file format. So if you've got an older camera, a 2 or 3 megapixel camera, it is time for you to upgrade. Most entry-level cameras are 6 to 8, so it should be no problem to get a larger pixel camera. The item must be the image only. I call these shots that are not image only romance shots, and that's because in product photography oftentimes it's so much easier to sell product to somebody, especially in a catalog listing, if you show the person what they could be doing with that item. For instance, patio furniture. It looks okay all by itself with an all-white background, but if you have a picture of the patio furniture on a nice, beautiful patio at sunset, well, it's certainly going to do a lot more for telling that buyer they could be doing this with this patio furniture. However, Amazon says no to those pictures in that first picture that you upload, the gallery picture. Now you are allowed to use those romance shots in the second and third image in, but the first picture must be in an all-white background and only the item, nothing else in the image. And that includes no text, watermarks, or promotional information. If you've spent any time on Amazon, you have probably seen people who upload pictures with watermarks. Well, here's the deal. They are not allowed, and you may say, well, other people are doing it, I'm going to do it too. But I know of a person who had several hundred images all watermarked on Amazon, and Amazon caught up with them and said, we're going to close your listings down if you don't get those watermarks off of these images right now, like yesterday. And that seller had to go through and re-upload new unwatermarked images, and it took hours and hours to do that, and that is time lost. So no watermarks or promotional information on those images. Even though they are your images, do not add that promotional or watermark information. It'll keep you out of trouble. Other no-nos for Amazon include no second insert images. So that first image especially has to be the item only, not what you could be doing with it as an insert on that picture. So no insert images. Also, no glare spots. So turn that flash off. Now there are other samples and product requirements, but those are the highlights. Those are the most important ones that you need to know about. Now if you're interested in seeing some more of the don't do's, you can visit Amazon, go to the help page, and then navigate to the vendor and publisher guides. Add images is the next navigation, and when you click on add images, you'll find the product image requirement information there on the Amazon catalog. Or you can simply do a Google or Bing search, and that should bring you to this page as well. Now that you know what you're not supposed to do, let's start talking about getting a good quality image for the Amazon listing. If you are selling books, all you need is a scanner. Just plug it into your computer. It doesn't have to be a super fancy one or expensive one. Most every flatbed scanner will work. It's going to save you time because you don't have to transfer the images, you don't have to set up your photo studio, and you get a nice high quality image for your Amazon listing. However, if you're going to sell other items that are dimensional, things that are not media, then it's going to be time to learn a little bit more about your camera settings, because there are settings on your camera that can help improve your images dramatically. Before we go any farther, I wanted to tell you what the Amazon stance is on the backgrounds of images. Now, again, they want that all white background. So it's an RGB level of 255, 255, 255. Or if you're working with photo editing software and you're looking for that all white look, it's that FFFFF number. It's all white. Now, read this slide carefully, especially this sentence that says even products that are photographed against a white background will require retouching to meet this requirement. Now, I think people who are not into photography assume that perfect pictures come right out of the camera. Well, that's never been the case. If you ever open up a magazine or look at the newspaper or look at a promotional flyer with a good quality image, that image has always been retouched, whether it was in a dark room in past decades or whether it was with photo editing software. Every good photo needs a little retouching, and especially with a white background. These white backgrounds do not come straight out of the camera. They do require a good quality image and some further retouching in photo editing software. So having told you that, I'm sure you're now thinking, how am I going to get a good enough photo? I'm not a professional. I don't know that much about my camera. How in the world will I get a good photo or good enough for the Amazon catalog? Well, that's why we're going through some of these steps today. The first one that will help your photos tremendously is a tripod. So purchase a tripod and get used to using it. When you handhold your camera, what tends to happen is, especially inside when you're doing what's referred to as slower shutter speed pictures, even if you have the image stabilization turned on, because the camera is moving slightly from your finger movement pressing on the shutter, it's never going to be super sharp. But if you attach your camera to a tripod, it's going to be on a nice stable platform when you take the picture. So you're going to have the best potential of having a super sharp picture. Now, tripods come in all different sizes and shapes. There are tabletop tripods and there are floor model tripods. There are super expensive tripods and there are less expensive tripods. If your tripod purchase is specifically for using inside, using it on your digital camera that's a little point and shoot camera, you're probably not going to need a super heavy duty tripod because you're not going to be out in the wind and the elements. You just need a tripod that will probably run you about $25. It's not a huge investment. So get a nice tripod that allows you to move the legs up and down easily and to adjust the angle of the camera so you can change the different angles and looks of the photos. So a tripod's going to do it. Then we're going to have to start taking a look at some of the camera features and how a camera kind of works. The first thing that we're going to talk about is a thing called depth of field. Now, what depth of field is it's a photo term for how much is in focus in front of and behind the main subject. Now, if you ever took apart a camera lens, and I'm not suggesting you do so, but most camera lenses have several pieces of glass. Some of them are concave, some of them are not. But they all interact with each other as the light travels through these different pieces of glass onto the back sensor to create an image that we see later on. The funny thing that happens though with light is when the light is traveling through these different pieces of glass, how wide open the lens opening is or how closed it is, it affects how much depth of field you have. Now, why the lens opens and closes has to do with, getting a good balanced picture. So just like our eyes, let's say you're out on a bright sunny day at noon. Well, the light is so bright that your irises close down really small because they don't need so much light to let in to distinguish all the different forms that you're looking at in bright light. But when you come inside into the house or into a darkened room, then your irises open, wide open to let in more light so that your eyes can process that information and send that information back onto your brain so you can see the different objects. Well, your camera does the same thing, only mechanically as opposed to us doing it naturally with our eyes. And because it's done mechanically, again, all those light optics come into play and change the depth of field. So again, how wide open or how closed up the lens is affects that depth of field. So if it's a really small lens opening, which is usually something like f/16 or f/22, something like that, a really small opening, letting in very little light because it's a bright day, you'll have a greater depth of field, more in focus in front of and behind the main subject. As the iris on the camera or those leaves on the camera start opening up and getting wider open, then the law of optics change and we start getting less in focus in front of and behind the main subject. Now, this comes into play even indoors when we're photographing our items. It can make a huge difference, especially if we're photographing smaller items to list on Amazon. So let me give you an example. Look at the difference here. The one on the left, I had a wide open depth of field, and there's hardly any area that's sharp and in focus. It quickly loses that depth of focus, and as we travel farther back, we're getting fuzzier and fuzzier. But even in the front, we hardly have anything in focus at all. Whereas this other one on the right, I used a small lens opening, and now I have a huge depth of field. It's sharp all the way back to the very back of that church. So this is the difference between using a wide open lens and a small opening lens. To adjust your f-stop, what you want to do is look at your camera. Now, many cameras have what's referred to as a mode dial. Now, a mode dial will either be on the top of your camera or on the side of your camera. In most cameras, like a Nikon and a Olympus and those kind of cameras, you'll want to go to the A setting, and that stands for aperture priority. And on a Canon, you'll look for the AV setting. Again, that stands for aperture priority. Now, what your camera will do is work in synchronicity with your shutter speed. Because if we go back to that original photo, the picture of the church, you'll notice that when we use those different f-stops, we have different shutter speeds. Now, with the wide open one, we had a 30th of a second, and with a closed up f/22, we had a 13-second exposure. So your camera will automatically adjust that if you set the f-stops. Now again, with a 13-second exposure, there is no way I can hand-hold my camera and have a sharp picture, even with the image stabilization or IS on. So you're going to have to put your camera on a tripod. But if you set the aperture priority, you'll be able to set these f-stops. And again, a small f-stop opening will give you the greatest depth of field. But again, it's going to slow down your shutter speed, so do expect that you're going to have to put that camera on a tripod. So once you have your camera set, you have a great depth of field, you'll have more in focus. Now it's time to start setting up other parts of the shot. The first thing is to create that all-white background. So what you need to do is create what's referred to in photography as an infinite field or an infinite background. So what I generally do is if it's a smaller item, I'll just take a piece of poster board, like a 16 by 20 piece of poster board that's fairly flexible, and I'll take one side of it and I'll attach it to a wall, and then I'll bring it gently forward and put it on my table, and then I'll have just one piece of paper that slopes gently forward. And that will give me a nice balanced infinite background. No two pieces of paper coming together at the seams, and so there will be no shadow. And that can be a big problem if you have those two pieces of paper coming together in that shadow. You're not going to have that all white floating on air look that Amazon wants. Now for larger items, you can actually get bigger pieces of paper. It's very hard to create an all-white background using material. So whenever possible, I try to use things like paper, because even though paper does get wrinkled, I can throw that paper away. But with cloth, what happens is if you don't iron out all the seams and creases in that cloth, each one of those seams and creases creates a small bit of shadow, and that's going to be very hard to create an all-white background using a piece of material like that. You're going to have to remove the item you're taking a picture of in the photo editing software from the background. Using one piece of paper or one piece of poster board, you probably are not going to have to use further manipulation in your photo editing software. Another component of getting that all-white background and a good exposure all the way around your image is good lighting. So let's talk about that for a minute. Until you're used to using a flash, I would recommend that you turn it off. Now, professional photographers spend years and years getting used to using strobes and flashes, and they can be a real blessing to the photographer. But if you're not willing to spend that kind of time and energy, which really you probably shouldn't be because you're busy running a business, you want to go for as simple a solution as possible. And in that case, it is probably going to be what's referred to as diffused lighting. Let's talk a minute about what diffuse lighting is so you can kind of get an understanding of what we're talking about. Now, harsh shadows really are a problem, those deep dark shadows, and they can be very distracting to your buyer. Now, you probably want a small, light bit of shadow on your item to give your buyer a sense of dimension. But when we get into things that have little hills and valleys, if you have deep shadows, the things in the hills and valleys of the item might be completely blacked out, and so your buyer can't see what's going on. Again, let's go back to our bright sunny day. If you're out on a bright sunny day, let's say, and you're looking around, everything has a fairly heavy shadow cast on it because the light is bright and sunny and there's nothing diffusing it. So you have these deep, heavy shadows. And with photography, the problem with the range of a photograph that your camera can take is that there isn't the subtle ranges that our eyes are able to pick up. So even if we're out on a sunny day, we can see detail in that shadow. But if we were to take a picture of that image, we'd probably see just a black area. And that's what's happening with shadows when you're taking pictures of it. So let's move on to a cloudy day. If you go out at the same time of day on that cloudy day, you'll notice that the shadows aren't quite so deep. And if you were to take a picture then, because your camera range is able to pick up some differentiation, it probably would be able to pick up a fairly good picture. No heavy black areas where that shadow was. So what we want to do is do the same thing in our photo studio. And there are different solutions that are available to the photographer. A simple one is this E-tint that you're seeing here. Now they come in a couple different colors, all white or all black. Now, the all black ones are actually designed for highly reflective items. So if you take a lot of glass or a lot of jewelry, you probably want these that have predominantly black and some white stripes. But if you take a variety of different pictures of different items, then you probably want the all white one, and they're easier to find than these black ones. So what you do with this cube, and they come in all different sizes, from a little jewelry size all the way up to doghouse size. So you can put in fairly large items into these cubes. Now, what you do is then take your lights and you put the lights on either side of the cube and have them shine in on the item. So what is happening, this material that's between the lights and the item are acting like the clouds on an overcast day. Now you can move these lights further from the cube or move them in, depending on how much shadow you want. Now you can also change the placement a little bit to make it look good. You're always going to have to look at the image or the item that you're actually taking a picture of to make sure that it's lighting correctly. So it'll always take a few minutes of actually moving the lights around and looking at the item as you're setting up these lights. Now the important thing to remember is that with these new digital cameras, they do have what's called automatic white balance, and that allows you to use non-standard photo lights to take pictures of your items. But the caveat here is that the lights have to be the same kind of lights. If you've got a light on either side of this cube, make sure that they're the same light. So either two halogen shop lights that are the same, two photo lights that have the same compact fluorescent bulbs in them, two desk lights that are using the same watt lights. They're cool whites. They all both have to be cool whites, not one cool white and one regular incandescent bulb. So they have to be the same, because your camera can correct for one color light, but it can't correct for a crossover. And that brings me to my next slide, which is, before you take the picture, be sure that all the other lights in your vicinity are turned off. If you've ever been into a photo studio, or you've ever seen a photo studio on TV, you'll notice that the photographer is standing in the dark usually. All the light is on the subject. That is because any kind of light that is ambient around can affect the photo as well. So if you're in a room and there's a window and light is shining in from that window, it's going to affect the color balance on your picture. But most often what happens is, like, for instance, oftentimes I'll set up my studio in my kitchen. I'll turn on my kitchen lights, set up all my lights, and if I don't turn that kitchen light off, that yellow cast will come in and hit my item, maybe just right on the edge of it, but it's still going to have a little bit of a yellowish cast. So turn other lights off. If you've been having problems with color balance, this could be the reason why. Next up is to understand a little bit more about what your camera is doing when it's taking a picture. I kind of like to call this Camera Psychology 101. Now, when you click the shutter down halfway, you're telling your camera, wake up, it's time to start taking a photograph. And what your camera does is it wakes up, the microprocessor turns on, and it starts looking for something to focus on. It also starts reading the color of the light in the room, and it's making the adjustment for those colors and making that white balance adjustment. And then it's also trying to determine what a good exposure will be for that image. And what your camera does is it reads all the different light sources and reflections in the viewfinder. So let's say you've got a bright light source. It's reading that bright light source. Let's say you have a black area. It's reading that black area. Maybe you have some things that are in what's referred to the midtones. Maybe you're taking a picture of clothing and you've got some blues or some reds or some mixed colors in there, and they're referred to as midtones. So what your camera does is it reads all the lights and all the blacks and all the midtones, and what it tries to do is balance all those different tones into one exposure. Now what the engineers did when they set up these cameras was to try to figure out a way to make the camera create that image based on all this information. The engineers gave the camera a target of what's referred to in photography as an 18% gray. An 18% gray sounds kind of odd, especially if we're talking about color, but it actually works. 99% of the time, your camera does exactly what it's supposed to and gives you an outstanding exposure for all these different values. However, when we get into the extremes, your camera starts having a problem. And guess what? When you're trying to make an all-white background, that is an extreme. So what your camera does in that situation is it reads the white background, and then it reads your item that you're taking a picture of, and it says, oh my gosh, I need to turn all that white into gray. And so oftentimes, even though you're trying to get a white picture, when you get the image into your photo editing software, you'll see it's actually gray. The camera's not broken, it's just doing what it's supposed to. So there is a function on your camera that will allow you to take some pictures that are overriding your camera's basic exposure decision. And it's called exposure compensation. So what you can do is set your exposure compensation to correct for this gray kind of problem. So what you want to look for on your camera is a little plus minus button. It's usually just a small button in the back, and when you press that, you will have a rocker switch or a roller switch somewhere on your camera that will allow you to plus or minus. Now with an all-white background, what you want to do is overexpose it. So you may want to try overexposing it by a third of a stop, which is the first setting, a half a stop, maybe 2/3 of a stop. Maybe you have to go a full stop or a full 2 stops to overexpose it to get that background white instead of gray. Now what photographers tend to do is they tend to do what's called or referred to as bracketing the exposure. So I don't know exactly which one is going to be perfect when I get it into my photo editing software, but because it's digital, I don't have to worry about how much money I'm wasting on film and having it processed. I can do a sequence of them. So try, if you don't remember whether I said over or under, you could even try one under, one normal, and one over. That's the normal way that bracketing happens, but you may want to try a sequence of over, 1/3, 1/2, one whole stop, and see which one works the best for you. Here is another little problem though. If you've ever looked at the viewfinder or the LCD screen, which stands for liquid crystal display, if you've ever looked at that display, that LCD display on the back of your camera, you may have noticed something about it. If you're out in bright sunlight, it's almost impossible to see that LCD display screen. If you're in semi-sun, it's a little bit easier, but depending on where the light is hitting that LCD screen, you're seeing something totally different, right? So if you're trying to figure out what the correct exposure is by looking at that LCD screen image only, how are you going to know if you've nailed that all-white background or if you have an all-gray background? That can be a problem. So that brings me to my next topic, and that's a thing called histograms. Now, it sounds kind of complicated, but it's something that is a tool that is available on all cameras, and it's something as a product photographer you really need to learn more about. So there's two places that you can find a histogram. The first is in the camera, and you may have come across this by accident when you click the display screen and you get this look up on your LCD screen. You get a little thumbnail view of the actual image you've taken a picture of. You get all this other exposure information that you probably never were interested in, and then you also get this little graph along the side. Well, that graph is a histogram, and that histogram is so very important. Now, most people, when they get this view, they want to turn it off right away because they want to see the image itself. But let me tell you something. With the new autofocus cameras, I'm less worried about my camera not getting the focus because I can always go back and take another picture if it didn't nail the focus, but 90% of the time it does, just perfect. More to the point, more of what I'm worried about first, before whether we got the focus, is whether we got a good exposure, because this piece of information is the deal breaker if I'm trying to get an all-white background. So I want to know, did I get a really good exposure on that image? Then I'll go back and review and make sure I got a nice sharp picture. That may sound backwards to you, but it's an important way to work, especially if you're trying to get that all-white background that Amazon requires. So let's talk a minute about reading this histogram. A histogram is a series of peaks and valleys, and it spreads out across the graph. Over on the right-hand side is the shadows, and if you have all your information over on the right-hand side and you're trying to get an all-white picture, it means that you have too many darks, too many blacks, too many darks. You're not going to get a good white balanced picture from this image. On the other side, you're going to get the highlights. If you have all the information over here, even if you're trying for an all-white background, it's going to be too much. So what you're trying for is good peaks and valleys all the way across. If you have too many highlights, you may actually see the picture blinking at you where the areas are overexposed. That's telling you that you do not have enough information in this image to print out a good picture. But if it's blinking all red and it's your white background, it might be okay. But generally, what you want to do is try to pull a good exposure out all the way across the histogram, good peaks and valleys all the way across. Here's an example of reading a histogram when you're reviewing it in your camera. This one on the top is too dark. See, all the information is over on the dark side, and you're not going to get a good white picture out of that. Now, too light is on the other side here in the middle. It's peaking all the way over on the right-hand side. Again, there is just not enough information to pull out a good picture, even with an all-white background, because we're not getting midtones, which is that area in the middle. Down on the bottom here, we have a good image. It's showing a good exposure, good peaks and valleys all the way across the graph. And once we have a good photo, what we want to do is take it into photo editing software. Because remember, at the very beginning, Amazon itself said you're going to have to do a little bit more manipulating with that image to get an all-white background. So do be prepared if you're going to upload to the Amazon catalog that you're going to have to learn a little bit about photo editing software and how it all works for you. Now, there is a piece of software called Blingit, and it allows you to remove the item from the background. It's actually a piece of software that was designed for eBay sellers, specifically for them to take the main item that they're taking a picture of, remove it from the background and put a colorful background in the back. But it also has a component where you can remove that image and put an all-white background in behind it. So if you just can't get those all-white backgrounds by taking a picture and you're finding it really frustrating, Bling It is fairly simple to use. There isn't a big learning curve to it, and you could use any color background you want. Let's say you don't have an all-white background. You could put your item on a piece of black paper or a piece of green paper and a piece of pink paper if you wanted to, or use cloth and take the picture. As long as it's well exposed, you could then take it into this Bling It software. Say I want to keep, let's say it's shoes. I want to keep the shoes, but I want you to remove all the background and replace it with white. It's about a 4-step process, and it is really fast and fairly easy to use. So that's a possible solution to learning your photo editing software and getting a good high quality image for your Amazon photos. Now, if you're going to create a lot of catalog photos, it might be time for you to step up to the plate and learn an Adobe product, Photoshop, or even Photoshop Elements. If you're not going to do a whole lot more than just using it for your Amazon catalog listings, probably Photoshop Elements is going to be good enough for you. Now, if you do purchase Photoshop Elements, they do have what is referred to as a magic extractor, which does the same things that Bling It software does. You can remove the item from the background and replace it with an all-white background. Very simple, few steps, and you're done. I should caution you that Photoshop is not something you just sit down in front of and know how to use it. There's layers, there's lots of commands. So take a Photoshop Elements or Photoshop class if you're going to jump in and start using Photoshop software. Now, we do have Photoshop Elements tutorials on the website, thewebsellercircle.com, if you're interested in learning more about Photoshop Elements. There's another piece of software that I really like, and it's called Google Picasa. Just do Google search for Picasa. Now, there are tons and tons of free software. There's IrfanView. I like to call it IR Fan View, but it's IrfanView. There's the GIMP. Oh gosh, there are so many of them. I could keep naming them. What I'm going to use for this demo is Google Picasa. I really like Google Picasa because it is pretty much plug and play. You download it. It takes just a couple of minutes. It's very intuitive, it's fairly simple to use, and it also has an element that is very easy to access, and that is that histogram information. So what happens with a histogram? It gets written into the metadata when your camera transfers that information, that exposure information or the picture information from the microprocessor to the card. This histogram information also goes with that photo. So photo editing software can access that histogram. So with Picasa, once you double click on the image to start editing it, here is what a histogram looks like. So this is the information that's been brought over from the exposure. So as I am manipulating the image to create maybe that all-white background, I can watch and make sure that I haven't gone out of the acceptable parameters for a good exposure image when I'm uploading it for the final product. So again, here is some histogram information. If I'm looking at this information and I'm tweaking it, here are, again, some parameters. Here's an overexposed image. You see all of the information is over here on the light side. This is telling me that here in the mid-tones and in the darks, there's just not enough information for this to be a good exposure. And as you can see, this is an item that is black, so I should have some black information over here in the black area, but I just don't have enough good information. Even though I've got a nice white background, I certainly don't have enough good pixels and information there for it to translate into a good exposure or something that I would want to upload to the Amazon catalog. Here's an example of it being underexposed. There's nothing really over here to indicate that there's any whites or lights at all. Well, you can see just a teeny tiny bump there, and that translates into those glare spots up there on the top of the picture. But essentially, if I saw this picture when I was taking the photo in the camera, I would know that it was too dark, that it is now time to use my exposure compensation and overexpose the image a little bit. So that is a good example of a too dark histogram. Now here is a histogram that goes all the way across the spectrum. There's hills and valleys all the way across. You've heard me say several times about midtones. What I'm talking about is this area in the middle of the histogram. There isn't a lot of midtones in this image, but look at the picture itself. There aren't a lot of colors in there. There's blacks and whites, and there's a little bit of red. And this histogram is indicating that's what it's seeing. Now, I hate to kind of use this overused phrase, but histograms are kind of like snowflakes. Each one is unique depending on what you're photographing. So you are going to have to do a little bit of interpretation on your own. But again, I've got information all the way across the histogram. And I've got a nice white background. It's very sharp, the image. This is a very good picture for the Amazon catalog. One more time to review. Here on the top, this histogram was too light. The one in the middle is too dark, and the one on the bottom is just right. So that's how you read a histogram. And remember, histograms can be found in two places. The first place is in the exposure review on your camera, and the next place is in your photo editing software as you are manipulating that image and finishing up the image and making sure you've got that all white background. All right, so to conclude this talk on Amazon Photos, I wanted to answer a few of the common questions that people have about the Amazon Photos. And you may have purchased this CD specifically to have these questions answered. And so I want to make sure that I address them before we sign off. The first question that most people have is specifically, how do I add a photo to that Amazon catalog listing? If you're creating your own listing from scratch, well, it's fairly simple to do. There is a tab in the Create Your Listing or Amazon Product Summary page where you can just go to Images and you click on Add Images. And when you do, a dialog box pops up and you just click on the Upload Images button, and that will allow you to navigate to your pictures area on your computer and choose which image you want to upload. Now it'll allow you to upload multiple images at once, so you can just go ahead and navigate to as many as you need one at a time. And once you have all the pictures that you want to add to the catalog page, just hit enter and it will start the upload. Oftentimes, you'll come across a product that has, or a catalog page that has been created, but you don't have a picture of the item. This is especially true with books. So if you are logged into Amazon, what you want to do is click on the square that says there is no image available, and there is a link there that says share your own customer image. When you get there, there's a button to browse your computer. You go to your My Pictures area. You select the picture that you want to upload. Do agree to the Amazon terms and conditions. And then you click on the Preview and Confirm Images area. And this will allow you to review the picture and add a caption. One little tip here is that Amazon really encourages you to add a caption to the pictures that you upload. So if you're uploading a picture because you're selling that item in the Me Too listings, why not say this photo was uploaded by Clover City? This is the actual item I have for sale, or something like that. So people know that you have one for sale and they can come look for you in the Me Too listings if they read those comments. Recently, you may, especially if you're selling a lot of media, you may have got a little dialog box in your Seller Central that's the Amazon Selling Coach that says XYZ amount of your listings are missing critical product information. So if you have one of those dialog boxes, you just click on Complete Your Listings, and from there is a Fix This link at the very right-hand side. And if you click that, most of the time it's the image that's missing. So you would click on Fix This, take the picture of the image if you have it. It might be a problem if you're doing FBA, but if you have the book, let's say at home, scan the book and then save it. Be sure and use the ASIN number or the ISBN number as the name of the file, and then click on Fix This, and it'll walk you through going to My Pictures area and uploading it into the Amazon catalog. So that's how you would fix those listings that the Amazon Selling Coach is telling you is missing product pictures. The other question that many people have is the opposite one of the one I just answered. That is, how do I remove a photo that I've uploaded? It took me a while to find how you actually remove a photo. It's not simple. It's sort of hidden. But you go into your My Account area, the first page of the My Account area, not Seller Central, but you'll log into your account, and that first splash page you get with all your account information on it. At the very, very bottom of the page, there's a section called Personalization. And what you'll want to do is go to your public profile link and click on that. It's under Community. And when you do, it takes you to a tabbed format, and you'll notice that it's reviews and listmanias, and the final tab is images. So it'll show you the images that you've uploaded. Now down at the very bottom, if you don't see the image right away, you'll be able to click on a link that says show me all the images that I've uploaded, or see all images. And when you click on that link, it'll bring you into a gallery view where you can use the arrows at the top to go through the images that you've uploaded. And as each one is highlighted, you'll get some information along the right-hand side. How many people have liked this image, comments and things like that. But also you'll notice under the uploaded by information, you'll see a link that says delete. And if you click on delete, of course it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete this image? And if you are sure, just hit delete and it will remove that image from the Amazon catalog. So that is how you remove an image from the Amazon catalog. This has been a presentation on how to improve your Amazon listings, presented by thewebsellercircle.com, where you can access information 24/7. It's available when you need it, not at somebody else's convenience. We talk about the issues that many small online retailers face in the day-to-day business world, and we'd love to have you join us. Come visit us at thewebsellercircle.com. I hope to see you there. This is Cindy Shovely.